You are listening to The Central Cast, a podcast for mystics and misfits just like you, recorded every week in Pasadena, California, before a live audience. Thanks for tuning in. No, I'm good. Thank you, Max. I do need my coffee, though. Mostly so that I don't choke on communion that always hangs out in my throat, which is ironical. Which is not a word. All right. I want to begin today, this July 4th weekend, with a short reading from the U.S. Constitution, specifically the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. These 16 words, just 16 words, contain two very important, powerful ideas called the Establishment Clause and the Freedom Clause. The Establishment Clause is the first part that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, and the Free Exercise Clause is the part that says, I'm finding it, is the part that says the government cannot prohibit the free exercise of religion. Okay, these two clauses maintain the separation of church and state, right? While also maintaining the freedom for individuals to practice whatever religion they want or no religion at all without the fear of government interference or persecution, right? I bring this up today because these ideas are being challenged today in our fine society, unlike any other time in history. On June 26th, so just 9 days ago, the Religious Liberty Commission, which is an advisory board created by our president and personnel by almost entirely conservative Christians, they released a report recommending the elimination of the Johnson Amendment, which would allow churches, the elimination of this amendment would allow churches to openly endorse and campaign for conservative Christian candidates. They kind of do already, but this would make it more overt, okay? The report also calls for allowing more religious expression in the public square, greater access to public funds for Christian organizations, and broader exemptions for those claiming religious objections to things like vaccine mandates and public school curriculum having to do with, the history of gay rights or sexual education. This report and series of recommendations is not unlike another report and series of recommendations that came out earlier this spring from another Trump-appointed religious commission called the Task Force to Eradicate Anti-Christian Bias, which is a mouthful and a wild, name for an organization. To eradicate Christian bias, right? Who knew that anti-Christian bias was such a huge problem in America? Anyway, this task force issued a scathing report alleging widespread government discrimination against Christians during the Biden administration. It claims there was abject persecution of Christians at all levels of government, and the solution to this is to increase the presence and influence of Christianity in the public sphere and in all spheres of government and society. Concurrently with these reports coming out this spring, just 10 days ago, you have the Texas State Board of Education officially approving a new statewide curriculum that mandates Bible lessons and Bible reading for 5 million public school students in Texas. That just happened. So this is where we're at today. At this historic and auspicious holiday weekend. Here we are. And I want to talk about how we got here and how we can understand what's happened, how we got here, and where it all might be going. Now, to be clear and to be fair, I don't think most evangelicals want to completely merge the church and state or create a theocracy and a culture that looks like The Handmaid's Tale. You familiar with that series? Okay. I think the left sometimes goes a little too far in asserting that this is what most evangelicals want and this is where we're headed if we don't stop them. I think America, this is good news, I think America is far too innately rebellious and individualistic and diverse, frankly, especially even within the church. The church is actually remarkably diverse. For that to ever happen, for there to be kind of a Handmaid's Tale outcome to what we're seeing today. But things can still get pretty bad, yes? As we're seeing, things can still get pretty bad. And I think if we were to ask most evangelicals today, I was an evangelical once until I was, 30? In fact, I once named my Christian band that I had with my brothers Buchanan, after Pat Buchanan in the 90s, because he was like this great outspoken evangelical Christian pundit in the news who was running for president. And I thought, he's going to help us reclaim America for God. And this is what we're going to name our band. We're going to call it Buchanan. That's who I was. So I get evangelical mindset about culture and society, right? But I think if we were to ask most evangelicals today what they would want, they would say, we're not trying to establish a state religion or force everybody to become Christians. We're simply trying to reclaim and reconstruct our Christian heritage and our status as a Christian nation under God. Right? And this is what they would say. And on the surface, that sounds kind of innocuous, but it's not, once you understand that what they're really talking about is they want to elect evangelicals to the highest offices in order to pass legislation and policies that would heavily restrict the civil liberties of those they find antithetical to Christian values. And that's basically everybody who isn't just like them. They also clearly want access to public funds and public schools in order to promote and propagandize all kinds of Christian ideas in the classroom and society. And they even have a kind of eschatological reason for that, because lots of them believe that until they are running everything virtually, Jesus can't come back. It's their job to usher in the second coming with this kind of culture takeover. There's an eschatological, end times, apocalyptic kind of worldview that's animating all that, along with their collusion with Israel and the Zionist expansionism of Israel. Okay? We know this. I mean, lots of us grew up in this stuff, right? How did we get here? How did evangelicals become this powerful, this influential in American society? I want to answer that question. And I think I have a good answer to that question. One must understand U.S. history. One has to understand U.S. history in order to get this. Evangelicals, of course, love U.S. history. You saw it this weekend somewhere, I'm sure. They love their U.S. history and love to claim that the United States is essentially, that U.S. history is essentially the history of America being a Christian nation that lost its way. And it's their job to help the church and good, patriotic, America-loving Christians to reclaim it and to steer this country back aright again. And they're not entirely wrong. They're not entirely wrong that the church has had an enormous influence on this nation, this culture, this government for for exactly 250 years. And I almost said more than that. Well, I guess it's a day now after that. Yeah, 250 years plus one day. The problem is they tend to whitewash that history, right? And embellish it in ways that suit their own agenda. For example, they claim the founding fathers were these devout, evangelical-like Christians who, thought and valued what they think and value today, which is partially true at best. A lot of the founders were only quasi-Christian, and some of them were even deists. What is deism? It means they didn't believe in a personal God who answers prayers and forgives sins and intervenes miraculously in history. They believed in a kind of creator God, sort of an absentee landlord who set everything in motion, but, isn't really involved, isn't really a being to begin with, maybe even just a kind of force out there. But that was the point of view of men like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and others. They were deists. The framers of our country, the supposed evangelical-esque framers, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and others, they were deists. But that said, many of these framers and founders did believe in the importance of religion for creating and maintaining a moral society and maintaining social cohesion. And for this reason, most of the founders did not want to banish religion completely from public life, but rather they wanted to keep the church and state in a kind of delicate balance with each other without letting one really influence or overtake the other. I'm not sure how many evangelicals understand all that. My guess is very few do. Nor do I think they understand who they're talking about when they talk about the original Christian settlers of this continent from Europe, i.e., the Pilgrims, and why they came here and who they really were. The myth, the popular legend or myth that we've all heard about the Pilgrims is that they were these freedom-loving, devout Christians who were being persecuted, unjustifiably persecuted for their faith back in England. And so they came here to build a free and open society for all, where everybody could practice their religion in peace. This is simply not true. The Pilgrims were a religious sect of the Church of England called the Puritans. Have you heard of the Puritans before? Okay. They were arguably the most insufferable fundamentalists you could possibly imagine. They went around England telling people that the Church of England was evil because it was still far too Catholic, thus the name Puritan. They wanted to purify the Church of England of all of its Catholic traditions and liturgies, things like that. But they also they went around demanding that people stop wearing colorful clothing. They went around telling people they shouldn't be eating food they really enjoy. Stop engaging in singing and dancing. They really hated the Globe Theatre, Shakespeare's Globe Theatre in London. They hated that place because they hated plays. You shouldn't go to plays. You shouldn't read Shakespeare. They were basically against doing anything enjoyable because pleasure from their theological point of view was inherently sinful because it took you away from the things of God. They were insufferable. They were absolutely insufferable, and nobody wanted to have much to do with them. There were social consequences for their behavior. And so they became persona non grata. And they came here to escape all that. And again, they didn't come here to create an open society of religious freedom. They came here to practice a version of Christianity that was stricter than the Catholic Church was in the 1600s. Think about that. They came here so they could set up a system of government where they could legally impose their version of Christianity on everyone. For example, they used to whip, torture, and even hang Quakers in New England because they didn't believe in Jesus the right way. Oh, yeah. Church attendance in the Massachusetts Bay Colony was mandatory under Puritan rule. You didn't go to church on Sunday, you would be fined 5 shillings or lose a day's worth of food. If you were a repeat offender, you would find yourself whipped, put in the stockades, or excommunicated. That's one way to drive church membership, right? That'll keep them coming. This is who they were. These are the wholesome Christian settlers of this country, right? That evangelicals love to hearken back to when they make claims about America's Christian roots and how we have to return to those roots because they were wonderful, right? So godly. They have no idea who or what they're talking about. Big surprise, right? But this is the history of Christianity in America. And it matters because evangelicals are the heirs of that history, whether they understand it all or not, which is to say there's something endemically American about Christian fundamentalism. Is there not? There's something very American about it. The revivalism, right? The frontier mentality, right? That kind of fervency. There's something endemically American about Christian fundamentalism. Always has been. There has always been this notion of divine chosenness in this country for white Christians. This idea that this land, we were given this land, us, these white European Protestant Christians, and we were to take it from the Native Americans and all the pagans and use it for God's purposes. There has always been this notion of divine chosenness and divinely ordained exceptionalism that goes all the way back to the Puritans, who believed that they had a divine mandate, a divine mission from God to fulfill in creating a model Christian society on this continent. They believed they were to be a bright and shining city on a hill. Have you heard that term before? It comes from a sermon from John Winthrop, the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, this Puritan sect. This idea of a bright and shining city on a hill for all the world to see, so that God might be glorified on the earth and his will done. This foundational mindset has been inherited and carried on by American evangelicals today. Evangelicalism is, to be frank, puritanical. It is puritanical in more ways than one. It is obsessed with purity, is it not? Religious purity, racial purity, ethnic purity, national purity, sexual purity. If you grew up evangelical, you know about purity culture. We all bear the scars. Like the Puritans before them, most evangelicals believe they too have a divine mandate to fulfill, to make America great again, to make America into that bright and shining city on a hill for all the world to see, so that God and his chosen nation might be glorified and his will be done. Evangelicalism has inherited these ideas and is therefore basically modern day Puritanism. This is the historical understanding we need today in order to understand how we got here and in order to understand the rise of what's now called Christian nationalism. Are you familiar with that term? Christian nationalism. This is a right-wing ideology today that seeks to merge Christian identity with national and civic life. It asserts that the nation is or should be defined by Christianity and that the government should actively preserve this religious identity by passing laws and public policy that embodies conservative Christian values. We all understand that, right? Christian nationalism wants to blur the boundaries between state and church. And this has really been the evangelical goal since at least the early 1980s with the rise of the moral majority and the religious right. Are you familiar with those two terms, the moral majority and the religious right? These were political movements starting in the late 70s, early 1980s, launched by the now late Reverend Jerry Falwell, who was a Baptist minister from the South, who got together with other prominent evangelicals at that time, who wanted to effectively merge evangelicals with the GOP for the purpose of creating a very large and very powerful voting bloc. Okay? A very powerful, very large constituency that would essentially defend all things white, Christian, and conservative by electing white Christian conservatives to the most prominent public offices. A quick but important aside about the religious right and the so-called moral majority. They were originally animated and brought together by a deep concern that the Carter administration in the late 70s was going to force Christian private schools in the South to fully integrate. And white evangelicals in the South were having none of that. And so they knew they had to get rid of Carter. And so they mobilized and organized with the help of Jerry Falwell and other prominent evangelicals. And they created this political powerhouse by merging with the GOP and ensuring that Carter lost the 1980 election to Ronald Reagan. Did you know that? That's okay. That's what we're here for. And while their movement was initially instigated and animated by racism and white supremacy, over the years, it's become more about a larger culture war between, good, God-fearing, patriotic Christians on one side, and on the other side, godless, anti-American, secular socialists who want to destroy all things wholesome and good with their multiculturalism and their push for gay rights, women's rights, and black rights. That's the culture war that we're in today, that we're still immersed in today. And why Christian nationalism is such a thing, and why evangelicals so desperately want to blur the boundaries between church and state. But here's the final thing I want to say about all that, and we'll open it up for discussion. It's fascist. It's basically fascism with a lowercase f. It's not full-blown fascism, but it's pretty fascistic. Yes? Now, that word fascism means different things to different people, but basically the word originates in Italy in the 1920s and 30s with the reign of Mussolini. It was used to describe the hyper-nationalist movement under Mussolini in Italy in the 1920s and 30s, and then soon thereafter, or concurrently, what was happening in Germany with the Third Reich. Basically, fascism is a political ideology that believes the nation must experience a rebirth, a renewal, and a return. Thank you. 11 a.m., everybody. If you have parking out there, go onto the app and do that. Usually Bob projects it up here. Ellie, you're Bob this morning. Thank you. Fascism is a political ideology that believes the nation must experience a rebirth, a renewal, or a return to this mythological, idyllic past of national, cultural and ethnic purity. Fascism teaches that a nation's cultural and moral decay is caused by classes and groups of people from inferior backgrounds that hold inferior and non-traditional beliefs and values. And it is only the eradication or subjugation of those inferior classes and groups, i.e., the gays, the Jews, the immigrants, and the people of color. It is only through the eradication or the subjugation of those classes and groups that national purity can be rediscovered, renewed, reborn, and we can have peace and prosperity once again. It is mythological. It is nostalgic. It is bullshit. It is violent. It is nonsense. It is garbage, right? Basically, fascism is hyper-nationalism mixed with nostalgia, racism, and religion. And lots of people just lap it up because it tells them that people who look and believe just like them are, the God-ordained good ones who get to have everything. Sound familiar? Yeah, you bet it is. And this is what's behind the rise of Christian nationalism today, and this push from evangelicals to blur the boundaries between state and church. Okay, so there's my happy, joyful talk from this morning. I hope you feel uplifted and encouraged. And as always, we want to open it up for dialogue, reflection, points of disagreement, critiques, affirmations. Yeah, anybody have anything they want to say to all this morning? Rodney, you were saying you didn't know about where the moral majority and the religious right started in the South. Yeah, it's kind of
the practical thing that was the basic.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I didn't know that either till recently. Yes, and exactly. Yeah.
I mean, sounds like what you're saying. It's founded on the being anti-integration of the private schools, but
Right.
then when Falwell wanted to take it national, he latched onto the abortion issue.
You got it.
To sell it to the masses.
To sell it, because they couldn't sell racism to 1980 America.
Which
Not
makes sense.
overtly. They couldn't, post the Civil Rights Act. They couldn't just come forward and say, look, we're a bunch of raging racists down here. We don't want people of color in our good Christian schools. You need to elect. Yeah, that was never going to sell. So what they did, they took abortion, which was not a major issue at all among evangelicals. When Roe v. Wade passed in 1973, nobody cared, including the Baptists.
That's right.
They shrugged it off. But Falwell and others convinced them that this was the main moral issue of our time. And Carter, who was a born-again Christian.
That's right.
Who was a devout church-going to the day he died. He didn't die not that long ago either.
That's right.
He was a good, kind, humble man by all accounts, too. He was a sweet guy.
Yep.
Okay. But he was like the most Christian president we may have ever had.
Yeah.
Okay. And they threw him under the bus. because he was pro-choice. He
Yep.
was pro-choice. And they knew that about him, and they knew they could use it against him because he was also pro-integration in the South. And that was the issue they really cared about. So they made it about abortion. And now even today, evangelicals, like my own family, my own sister, she's like a one-issue voter.
Yep.
It's about abortion, right? That's wild, right? But you got to know your history. Yeah.
It's a fascinating development, how it came from the integration issue to abortion.
Yeah. And I think what that means really is underneath the surface, the whole evangelical political project, it's basically founded on racism and white supremacy, is what that is. Right? That's basically the roots and the heart of it. The culture war, it's really just white supremacy, patriarchy, these kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw the headline about the Texas mandate for Bible verses, and I don't click on every headline I see online, obviously,
Right.
because who's got time for that? But that one intrigued me so much, I clicked, I was like, "This can't be real."
I know.
Like, mandate Bible verses in school? What, huh? And I was like, "No." And I read it. I was like, "Yeah, that's Texas."
There's going to be
It's
lawsuits,
like,
and I don't
okay.
think it goes into effect until 2030.
Right.
There's going to be lawsuits. It might
Of
get
course.
overturned, but still.
But still, just the fact that
Yeah.
and you mentioned how you don't think we could get to the level of The Handmaid's Tale, and I don't know if I used to think that when I watched the show, but then I was like, I don't think MAGA is the majority of Republicans, but they're strong enough to kinda have the effect that they're having on society now, so I'm
Yeah.
not so sure that a small minority of a certain sect could,
Yeah, you might be right.
make things be like The Handmaid's Tale.
Well,
Because all it takes is for the majority of the people who feel a certain way to just kinda sit silent,
yeah.
kinda how we feel about Republicans today.
Yeah.
Like, not enough of them come against the ones on the far right,
Yeah.
so
I do
those
take a
on
lot of
the
hope.
extremes, rise to power.
Yeah. No, you might be right. But I mean, I do, like I said, I take a lot of hope in the innately rebellious, individualistic
Yes.
American
Ideal of
mentality.
yeah.
And,
Freedom and
the,
liberty. You
yeah, but
can't tell
also,
me what to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's endemically American as opposed to,
Indeed.
more of a rules-based, naturally authoritarian society. Plus the incredible multiculturalism and diversity even within the church, I think.
Right.
The church is pretty diverse to itself. We are not monolithic.
Not at
Anyway,
all.
I take hope in those things as innately disruptive towards any kind of, strong authoritarian takeover like that. But I don't know. We've
Another
never been
thing
here before.
That's
I've
right.
never been here before.
Another thing I learned of this week, a friend pointed out to me, is the rise of Islam in America. Like,
Hmm.
I had no idea that the numbers were increasing.
Me neither.
And it's a small, I mean, there's still like, I think the article I read said by 2050, it'll be 2.1% of
Oh,
the
yeah.
nation, which I think is small enough to be negligible. It's not like they're going to take over.
Well,
But
the right believes that's
I was
happening.
about to say, but if you're on the right and you see that, you're just, oh no, got to do
Yeah.
something about this.
Booga,
So
ooga booga.
just
Yeah.
add that to
Yeah.
the fear of
Yeah.
them becoming the minority. And by the way, that increase is not caused by conversion, it's just caused by
Immigration.
immigration.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
to me, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
just
Somebody
add
else
that
this
to
morning.
things you
Thanks,
didn't
Robbie.
know.
Yeah, Michelle.
I just want to mention a book that I know you're familiar with, Aaron, that'll kind of add to this. Is Jesus and John Wayne.
That's a fabulous book.
I've read it twice. Now I need to read it again based on
Yeah.
what you said. Maybe you want to, I don't know, tell the people a little bit of what it's about. But man, it was pretty eye opening.
Christian Kobes Dumez did an amazing thing in that book. It is so dense. There's so much information, so much research that she did. But yeah, she ties what would you say, Michelle, is the central argument of that book? What would you say?
I don't know if it's the argument as much as what stood out to me about the pairing of the politics and the religion for a stronger pathway to power and wealth
Right.
over so many things. That's what I
Yeah.
got a lot out of it.
She really found everything, her entire theory as to what happened in America especially today, on this kind of this return to this strong male authoritarian figure, this desire for a daddy, you know, to the cowboy. It's the cowboy mystique and the American cowboy ethic that in times of uncertainty and trouble, this nation wants to go back to and harken back to some kind of male authoritarian figure to save them. It's the cowboy, and especially she argues that in post-Cold War America, and certainly after the advent of nuclear weapons, the desire for that kind of male authoritarian figure has grown in this country because there's that innate sense of uncertainty and trouble. She argues along those lines that it's patriarchy, basically. Yeah, that's the John Wayne part of the title. Yeah,
and we've got people wanting to go back to that. Let's have a household vote.
Right. Yes, they want to.
Let's diminish the women, the minorities, and everybody, and put these white men in power.
It's astonishing that that's even now part of like common conversation now, that those ideas are, and then what, yesterday there was those white nationalists marching in DC. Like, that's common in America now. That's normal stuff going on.
And look what happened with the SBC.
The Southern Baptist Convention.
Vote to not have women teach in any capacity.
Right.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I think they don't even want them teaching kids.
Yeah. The idea that they would ever even become affirming, that some people are staying in those churches to try to steer them towards, like, they're not even there with women yet. They're not even for women teaching or preaching or pastoring. The idea that they're going to be affirming is just like, it's like another galaxy away. It's never going to happen.
They're just threatened by it all.
Precisely. Yeah. I want to see a Southern Baptist church function at all without women, because women are always doing the secret work that makes the entire church function. Anybody with any time in any church understands the hidden, unseen work of women and how it actually is the foundation of everything in the church. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, let's don't give them any power.
Don't give them any power.
Let's still don't pay them the same as a man doing the similar job.
It's interesting. I actually watched some of the debate at the SBC conference where Rick Warren, you guys know who Rick Warren is?
Oh, yeah.
Of Saddleback Church?
Yeah.
He probably was the most powerful pro-woman voice there. He got up and almost got into a shouting match with Al Mohler, the president of the SBC. But they won't even listen to Rick. They won't even listen. They will not even listen to Rick. And Rick's not a progressive. Rick is not a.
Kick him out?
What's that?
Did they kick him?
No, they didn't kick him out, but they basically told him where his place was. Yeah. He's been sort of on, but think about, there you go. He's the left end of the SBC, which is for us over far to the right of us, obviously. But but they won't even listen to him. Anyway, interesting stuff going on. Yeah. Somebody else today have any remarks? Well, let us conclude our time together as we always do. I don't have the slide up here, but I do have it on my phone. But before I conclude us with this benediction, just a couple of announcements. We are going to have Brew Church this coming week on Wednesday at Benny Boy Brewing in Lincoln Heights. That's down by you, Anna, right? Is it Boyle Heights or Lincoln Heights? I think it's Lincoln. Yeah. Benny Boy Brewing, cider house, brewery, really nice outdoor, like little garden area right off the 1015 right there. Anyway, Lincoln Heights. Yeah. We'll be there from 6:30 to about 8 if you want to join us. And then starting next week, for the next 2 Sundays, I'm going to be doing a summer series called Structures of a New Spirituality. So we're going to be talking about, we try to focus on what reconstruction looks like in a community like this. So the next 2 Sundays, I'm going to be talking about that. But there you go. Let us conclude our time together now with this benediction. And if you know it, say it along with me. As we go from this place, we commit ourselves to the path of love, honesty, and humility. We dedicate ourselves, as Christ did, to the cause of justice and the courageous embrace of this life, this world, and each other. Amen. Thanks, everybody, for being here, and go in peace. Thanks for listening in on this week's edition of the Central Cast. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you join us next time. Bye-bye.